into it, I wanted to share a little bit more. Most of you all know who we are, but in case you don't, this is brought to you by Media Justice and Tiny Gigantic. Media Justice, who are we? We're a really rad nonprofit organization that we boldly advance racial, economic, and gender justice in a digital age by fighting for a just and participatory platforms for expression. We harness community power through our network that hosts close to 100 organizations to claim our right to media and technology that keeps us all connected, represented, and free. Yay. And then I'm very excited today that we have Tiny Gigantic with us again for round 3 of our Digital Defense Lab. So if you haven't met Myung, you're gonna get to know Myung today, who is the founder of Tiny Gigantic. Myung is a digital self-defense and community safety practitioner who is an enthusiastic breaker and maker of technology for social justice. Myung has worked in digital security and human rights for over 15 years. They see holistic security as one of many superpowers that social justice movements have to care for each other, to be more sustainable, and to be stronger in the face of injustice. To Myung, digital security and safety issues are directly connected to the ways that we can better design, use, and regulate technologies for social justice. Myung is part of queer and Korean adoptee movements in the US, and they find inspiration and wisdom in working alongside others with the deep understanding that our liberation is tied together. Prior to their work with Tiny Gigantic, they co-founded the Research Action Design Justice Cooperative. They hold a BS from MIT and a master's from UC Berkeley. And they were a 2017 fellow with Data and Society, and also in 2018, if I got that right, the Open Technology Fund. So that's what I'll have to say for Myung. And one more announcement before we kick it over to our rad facilitator is for our participants. We also ask that you take care of yourselves and take a break if you need it. We really appreciate your participation and all the ways that you show up with us. We do know that there's a lot going on in the world, and it's understandable if it's hard to take in all of this information. I hope you know that we are honored and happy to be in community with each of you, and we're happy that you chose to spend time with us today. So thank you on behalf of Media Justice, and I'm gonna hand it over to Myung to get us started.
Thanks, Adrienne. Hi, everybody. It's good to see some names and faces today. And yeah, I just want to repeat that another time. There's a lot going on, and we might be holding a lot of things in our hearts and minds. So thanks for your time, and yeah, thanks for making this space together for this for a couple of hours. This is the 3rd lab, and we have one more on Thursday. Today, we're going to be really looking at the devices that we have in front of us, our computers and our phones, and working with settings that are built in, that are free to use, that we just have to turn on once to keep our devices more secure. We'll turn those on. We'll take a look at using some free software like antivirus scans and freely available updates to our own software. And then on Thursday, we're going to take a look again at whatever devices we have. And we're going to look at the ways that they sense the environments around them, cameras, mics, biometric sensors, what that means. We'll talk about what kinds of risks that might bring to us, and how we can be in a different relationship with those sensors, learning how to turn them off, learning how to cover them up, learning how to access the memory that they store. All right. Without further ado, I will share my screen. And so please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know what your name is, your pronouns, where you're calling in from, and what's one thing that you're hoping to get out of today. All right, well, feel free to type in as we go. Thanks, Adrian. We need to get a better sense of what organizations are struggling with for device management. Tulani. Tulani, he, him, Media Justice, Greenfield, Massachusetts, hoping to learn more about encryption. Sorry, Adrian, California, Tongvaland, Media Justice. That's that part. Raj, he, him, forward together, working remotely from Santa Fe, New Mexico. I want to learn about encryption of data and privacy controls. Wendy, she, her. I know it's important to have digital safety, and I really suck at it, so need some help. Alexandra, she, her, based in Colombia, looking to learn about safe practices and tools to enhance the security of my PC and phone. DC Vivo, they, them, DC Piscataway Land, Media Justice, hoping to get some tips on how to be better about securing my personal devices and our orgs. Great, thanks y'all for sharing. Sarah, she, her, Central California. I'm excited to actually take some steps in workshop to be in community with them. Great, I'll keep going if I believe that's everyone. The goals of today are, again, just to use the things that are already built into our devices, the security settings that are there for us, and free software to protect our devices. Luckily, there are a number of security settings that are built in at this point. Some are even turned on by default these days, and we'll learn about that. That's great, and that's a change from the last 5 years for sure. We'll share at the end. We'll share a practice of compartmentalization. When we're talking about digital security, compartmentalization just means keeping things separate digitally. The purpose is so that we can separate our risks when we're thinking about security, but we'll also talk about why this is important to us socially, and why we like to keep our identities separate, and how we can do that online. Our agenda will be to work hands-on with our computers, phones, and tablets to encrypt them, then to make sure that everyone here has installed and set a free antivirus program to run once a day, to look for and install any software updates, and then to discuss and share compartmentalization practices. And then we'll close out. Any questions about that? Before we get going, pressing buttons on our devices, please, let's check in about backups. So when we encrypt our device, what we're going to be doing is turning on encryption, which will scramble the data and it will lock it with the passcode that we set. There is a slight risk that something will go awry as you encrypt. Let's say your battery runs out halfway through the encryption process. It shouldn't, but in a worst case scenario, it might that might corrupt some data and make it inaccessible. And then also, I've had this happen before. People in workshops sometimes set new passwords and forget them. And then you also get locked out of your data in the future. So before we get any further, let me just check in. The devices that you have with you, have you backed up anything precious that's on there? That might be photos, videos, recorded messages, text messages. Yeah, and then let's talk about how. Yeah, I mean, for our purposes right now, before you would even, I would ask you before we try to encrypt things to make sure that you have a copy somewhere. So iCloud could count. Maybe your copy is, oh, I actually post every photo that I take to a social media site. Just a copy, so that if something happens with your phone, or you won't lose access to that. I hate to separate people from their precious things. Okay, so that's a yes, so I'll keep going. iCloud backup. So this question, Wendy, is a great one, the where and how. When we're talking about making a copy, if we need to think about somewhere secure for stuff. So let's say these are photos or videos or messages that are really private or that are secrets. Then somewhere you want to think about using something secure. And by that, we mean it's encrypted. It's protected with a password and two-factor authentication if it's available. And you manage who has access to it. Does that make sense? So iCloud backups are not end-to-end encrypted. So I wouldn't store secrets there. We'll talk about that a little bit more next. But they certainly are password protected. You can turn on two-factor and you can manage who has access to it other than Apple. Okay, what is encryption? So we talk about end-to-end encryption a lot. Have people heard that term? Yeah. Does anybody want to say what they think it is? I guess it's on the slide. End-to-end encryption is when we encrypt or encode something and it's locked. It's only accessible via keys that the sender and the receiver have. So you might send an end-to-end encrypted message through Signal. And that means that if I send a message, say to Sarah through Signal, then only I and Sarah are able to unlock that message. Even Signal itself cannot unlock it because it is not one of my intended recipients. That's really important. There's a end-to-end encryption is really important for activists in any context that we're in, especially when we're using platforms that are susceptible to state surveillance. And this is an actual picture of an encrypted email. If you were to intercept an encrypted email and try to read it, what you would see would be a bunch of characters, which is that block after it says begin EEP3 encrypted text. There's a string of characters, lowercase and uppercase, letters and numbers, and even some symbols, none of which are actual words, just a continuous string of characters. That's a message that's been encrypted, and the recipients can decrypt it with their keys. So we also talk about encrypting devices. And it's a similar thing where by encryption, we mean scrambling, but we don't have end-to-end because we're not sending this thing somewhere. We have a thing that we call full disk encryption, which means that the whole, whatever the disk is, well, maybe it's a hard drive, or maybe it's even a removable drive, like the removable hard drive and the removable USB drive that are in the picture here. And we call it full disk encrypting. So you can encrypt it with a password. And if someone has it, they can't look at the data or use it without that password. We can do this with phones as well. You can encrypt the hard drive of your phone. You can encrypt the memory on your SIM card, and you can encrypt removable storage on your phone. I put pictures of it there because some different phones have different removable items. Some of us can remove our SIM card, some of us cannot, but this is what it looks like. Maybe if you buy it new from a vendor. And then this, again, some phones have removable memory. And here's a picture of a micro SD card, which is what most phones would have as removable memory. We can encrypt all those pieces. What risks does this encrypt? So your device is encrypted with your password. That means that if anyone has your device and it's turned off, if they try to start it up without your password, they can't use it at all. Like they can't start up and open up anything and look at any data. It also means that if someone tries to copy your device while it's off, all they would be able to copy is the encrypted version of it. They could make a copy of that and then try to decrypt it. You trying to guess your password over time with that copy, but not with the device that's in front of them right away. Or not right away is the point. So this is different from just setting a password, because if you just set a password, somebody could potentially make a copy of your device and guess your password and get in over time. So this doesn't address if your device is turned on and you've decrypted it, if you've entered your password and then someone takes your device from you, then they'll be able to get to your information and be able to make copies of it. If your password is stolen or guessed, again, they'll be able to decrypt it. If somebody copies the encrypted device, they can try to brute force it by guessing that password. So, and the data that's not on your devices, like backups that you've made to the cloud, aren't necessarily encrypted. So the use case or the example of when this might happen is I'm out at a protest, I have my phone, and it's taken from me. It's seized by the police, say, and they try to make a copy of it, which we know they do. They have devices that you can plug in to a phone and just make a straight copy of it, and then take it back and analyze what's on that phone. So if somebody makes a copy of my phone and it's encrypted, that data, it's really hard for them to get at it. If it's just, if it's not encrypted, you can make an actual copy and take it back to your office or lab and access it pretty directly. Encryption is stronger when your devices are off, and this works differently for each device. So if you are going into a place where you think there's a high risk of your device being taken, if you're going through a checkpoint, if you're walking through a security point at a door or checking into a flight or something, you want to turn off your devices before you go through that checkpoint. If it's on and you've decrypted it, some parts of your data are going to be less well protected by that encryption. It varies by device. That's a thing to know if you're traveling a lot, especially for folks who have to travel through checkpoints for that. You definitely want to make sure it's off. Any questions? Okay, so we're going to practice encrypting our devices. Can you please send into the chat the types of devices you're using? So the kind of phone you're using, if it's an Android or an iPhone, and the kind of computer you're using, if it's a Mac or a Windows device, or some other kind of device. Thank you. iPhone, Mac. I've set it up so we have some instructions for both Android, for Windows, Macs, Androids. It's good to see. Is anybody using a Windows machine? Right. Sarah, great, okay. Oh, actually, Media Justice Team, can I ask you to help copy paste these links into the chat?
I got you.
Thank you. Cool. So both Windows and Macs at this point have built-in encryption software. Yay. And with Windows, if you're using Windows 10 and later, it's going to be included. There might be a limitation with Windows 10 where it might need to be a business version. But the built-in program is called BitLocker. And there's a link there about how to turn it on. It's in your settings. So take a look in your settings. There should be something called updates and security and device encryption. And you'll turn it on. It should be able to run in the background. And if it can't, you can schedule it for later or set a reminder. Thanks for that, Adrian. With Mac, there's a tool called File Vault that's built in. I can just show this on my, I'll share my whole screen and show you where this is. There's the whole desktop. So for Mac devices, similarly, it's in my system preferences. And then I find something called security, privacy. Click that. You can folks see this? The security window?
Yes.
Great, thanks. You'll find a security setting called File Vault. Mine is turned on. That is what they call full disk encryption on a Mac. So turn it on if it's not on. Can you access the presentation at the end? Absolutely. And the previous one as well. You can use BitLocker and to also encrypt your external media if you happen to use an external hard drive or USB drives. And there's slightly different directions on a Mac about how to encrypt. There's a link here too. Oops. Oh, it's fine. On a Mac, you just plug your device in and you find it in the Finder, and you'll see encryption as an option there, as an action to take. One other thing I wanted to bring up is that Mac also, there's some good support about how to encrypt your backups. Mac devices offer these backups. You can create backups of your computers, your iPhones, your iPads, often to iCloud. I think that's how it's set up by default. So they have instructions about how to encrypt those backups as well if you want to do that. Are people finding these settings? Are you finding that things were already turned on or that you have to turn them on? Already turned on? Devices these days are shipping with this on by default, which is also great. So any new Mac computer that you receive, this should be turned on already. That's probably what you found when you got there. I want to mention your phones as well. So I saw a lot of iPhones in the mix. An iPhone is by default, it's encrypted when you set your passcode for the first time. It's encrypted with that passcode. On an Android, they are now shipping encrypted as well, but you, if you didn't buy it in the last year, it might not have shipped encrypted. So open up your settings on your Android device, just do a check, go to settings and then security. You should see a setting that says encryption and credentials or encrypt this device. And it will tell you there if the status is encrypted or not. Are you using any other devices that you're curious about how to encrypt? Feel free to unmute. There aren't that many of us. So if you want to unmute and speak, that's also fine. Okay, so this is a device basic. We want to make sure that our devices and all of our plug-in memory is also encrypted, full disk encrypted from now ongoing. So if you are responsible for an organization, this is the kind of thing to make sure that all your staff are checking and setting as well. We do know that devices get stolen and seized from activists. And so we want to take care of that disk and try to make it as hard to break into as possible. Any questions about encryption before we keep going? All right. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is set up a free malware, anti-malware program. Sorry, not free malware. And I wanted to show some examples of malware. These you're probably familiar with, but just to make sure. So ransomware is something that we hear about more and more. And ransomware is a kind of virus that installs itself on your computer, and then it encrypts your device or your data and says, I'm gonna keep your information encrypted until you pay me some money, generally through Bitcoin. This is, I believe, an actual screenshot from a ransomware attack that was levied against the National Health Services in the UK a few years ago. That really, it led to a system-wide failure, and hospitals were unable to check people in for a period one day. And that happened, that virus installed itself actually because some of the computers in the system were running an outdated version of Windows that hackers were able to get through and install this software. Another example of malware that's really common is spyware. So an example that's been in the news is something that's called Pegasus. Have folks heard of that a bit? Pegasus is a piece of spyware that was developed by an Israeli surveillance technology company. And it installed itself over WhatsApp. So with most malware, what happens is that we notice that it's installing itself because it comes as in the form of an attachment to an email, or we maybe land on a website and the website tries to download a piece of software to us. So we would notice it. The thing about Pegasus is that it is able to install itself without us noticing. It doesn't use any of those pathways. It was working through, even if you received a missed call on WhatsApp, it was able to use that as kind of a security hole into your phone and install itself as spyware. Spyware is something that installs itself into your device and then is able to use your device's, say, microphone, camera, or even sometimes to log as a keylogger, to log the things that you're typing. Okay, so that's malware. And we already talked about some ways that we get them: attachments, downloads, remote installation like Pegasus. This used to happen more, but US, like other people, sometimes if you use shared computers, if you're in the practice of going to a place where you share computers, say maybe when we become more used to, again, to going to places like the library, we use computers. If you bring your own USB device or something, people sometimes get viruses because they plug those into shared devices, and maybe there's a virus that installs itself from that device onto the USB, and then you plug it back into your device at home, and you get a virus that way. Or security holes in software. And then another really common way is fraudulent copies of software and apps. So only a few folks I saw had Androids, but especially for people with Androids, when we go to our app stores to download an app, you might notice that there are many copies of the app that you want to install, or what looks like similar apps. That's the most common way of getting spyware on our phones, is we download a fraudulent version of an application. A way to make sure we're downloading the right application is you can go to the website of the company that makes the software and follow their links. That's the sure-proof way to do it. Or you can just be really careful about reading the description in the App Store and make sure that it's the app that's been posted by the company or the developer that you know made that app. App stores are getting better also about cleaning out fraudulent versions. So we can use antivirus software. Our devices, at least our computers, used to ship with antivirus programs installed. And now with Macs, we have to download and install them. And with Windows, it should be on there already. Sorry, it depends on what Windows. The business versions, usually the business account owner has already installed it. But if you're a personal computer user, we need to install a program. We're going to use a program called Avast today. There are a number of different antivirus programs out there. Is anyone using one already that you know? Um, I ask that because there are a number out there, and just find one that we just need to find one that's free, that you can verify as coming from a reputable security company. Avast is one of those. So what we're gonna do is, were people able to download and install this yet? Not on my Mac. Cool. Yeah, there used to be, I've heard this rumor that Macs can't get viruses, and I just wanna dispel that as myth. So there was a time when fewer people used Mac devices, and so that meant that fewer people made Mac viruses because it wasn't worth the time. But now that so many more people use Macs, plenty of people are making Mac viruses. So I like Avast. It's one that I've been trying out. I sort of swap between different free software now and then just to see how it works, to see if there's anyone that I recommend rather than others. I've been using Avast for the last year at least, and I like it, so I recommend it. It's available for Macs and Windows. If you follow the to the Avast page and land there, it's gonna sense what kind of computer you're using. So I use a Mac, so it's automatically putting me, if you're on your Windows machine, it should be automatically showing you to the download free Windows protection. Please click download. It'll download a piece of software and you'll install it. So I'll come back to the slide. But the one thing that we want to make sure that we do is set up a daily scan. When you install it, it should do a scan, but please open up Avast Security when you get it installed and click an icon, the more scan that says more scans when you roll over it, and it looks like a magnifying glass. This will take you to a screen called Scan Central, and you can set up scans, including a daily one. And you do that by clicking Custom Scans. You'll see that I've already set up a daily scan, but if you're coming to hit this for the first time, you can click New Custom Scan. Call it my demo custom scan, demo daily scan. I'm going to choose Deep Scan, and you can see the link that Adrian just posted. It gives you more information if you want to learn more about the types of scans. You can target specific areas and types of files. I actually don't know the difference between Deep Scan and Max Scan. Thanks, Danielle. Take care. You can set it to run. I set it to run daily. So the way that an antivirus scan works is that it's kind of like a dictionary. Every time a new virus comes to be known, an antivirus software dictionary gets updated with that virus. And when your computer is scanned, your antivirus software is checking to make sure that there's nothing on your computer that looks like that virus. If it finds something, it quarantines it for you and asks and sort of walks you through ways of taking it off your machine. So we want to make sure that we're running this every day so that we take advantage of the fact that our antivirus software is updating itself every day. Any questions?
This is Adrian.
Hey,
I have a question. Is it normal to be nervous about free software on the internet?
Yeah, great question. So it is absolutely normal to be nervous. So the way that these antivirus software programs provide anything for free is they often have tiers of software. So it might be free for individual users, and then they have paid accounts if you are managing a fleet of devices, if you are like managing an organization's computers or phones or something. And then they are gathering some data as you run it. So you're kind of opting into informing their knowledge of, say, the frequency of finding viruses on devices. That's probably the data exchange trade-off there with the freeness. So I do want to check in about, what this does and doesn't do. It lets you identify and address known viruses. What it doesn't address is it doesn't stop other people from trying to attach things or trying to download things to your device. So you still have to try not to. Your antivirus software should catch it if you do download something that looks like a known virus. It should let you know not to install it. But we should still be careful and double check if somebody sends us something that we didn't expect, or if someone we don't know sends us something. Sarah, I see your message. 1 second. Let's see. So this also doesn't address security holes in software. So that's why we need to install our updates. It doesn't necessarily address fraudulent software and apps. It doesn't necessarily stop us from choosing something from an app store that's a fake. If it's a known fake, it will. And it doesn't stop people in real life using our machine in ways that we wouldn't. Whether it's people who are intentionally, maliciously sitting down to install something, or just maybe someone we lend our device to who doesn't also have the same practices of checking attachments or making sure that they don't go to sketchy websites, that kind of thing. Sarah, Windows is not letting you install. What's happening over there? Is it giving you a specific message? Yeah. Hey, Sarah.
Yeah, it's giving me a message where it's essentially telling me like your Windows device can't install this, and like to go to the App Store, the Microsoft App Store. It also, there was a link at the bottom that also gave me an option to change my settings. And it took me to the app and feature settings. And so yeah, I thought that was issue. But when I went to click on another option, nothing else. Like for instance, it was originally set on anywhere but warn me before installing the app that's not from the Microsoft Store.
Yeah.
And I switched it to anywhere, and still same thing. So.
Huh. Do you know, did it install the Windows version, or sorry, did it download the Windows version? It did. Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
I wonder if maybe on reboot it would let you or something, if the permission should change on the fly, but let's make a note and we can check in too and see if that works for you after workshop.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Were you able to install it and set up the daily scan? Antivirus software is also available for our phones. The more they become like tiny computers, I mean, they are already just tiny computers. The more that becomes important. A ransomware attack on our phones could many times be more personally impactful than a ransomware on, say, an organizational computer to me, because maybe my phone also has photos, precious photos, or all of my contact information for friends and comrades. So the great thing about what we're doing today is a lot of these things are sort of what we say is set it and forget it. We have to set it up once. It's good to know why we use it so we can tell others. But after this, it's set and it's taking care of itself. And then the third thing we're doing with our devices is just making sure that our updates are installed. So what are the reasons you don't install your updates?
Because I forgot.
You forgot. In the middle of something else. Busy doing something else. Yeah, I was just thinking about myself being busy surfing the internet and telling my operating system that it's not the time to update because I'm busy. Updates break things, totally. Sometimes it's worth it to just pause and see if that operating system update is messing up other people's computers, and then install it a few days later. Indeed, I don't trust that it won't mess up my phone, waiting for them to troubleshoot this update. Yeah, Apple especially. Cool. Yeah, these are all reasons that are learned from experience. The thing where your update breaks your device or breaks your application is painful. The thing is that most of the time, when we get these software updates, they're patching security holes. So in the same way that our antivirus software becomes aware of new viruses, our software developers, companies become aware of security holes and flaws in their software, and they push out patches. So we want to be saying yes to these updates, and to address some of these concerns, I do accept as a personal practice, I always accept updates to software applications because it's always possible to go to the website of that developer and download a previous version. So if they put out a lemon of an update and you install it and things just don't work, you can always go to their website and get the previous version of it until they fix their update. With an operating system update, I totally understand pausing, and I think as a matter of personal practice, I weigh what I'm doing that week with sometimes when I install an update. If I'm in the middle of something that can't wait, I'm helping somebody address an emergency, a crisis or something. I don't want my computer to break. I can't afford to have that happen. So I might wait to do my operating system update until that's addressed, and I feel like that situation is in a safe enough place that I could manage to lose a few hours or even a day on my device if it happened that way. So that's my personal practice. I think everybody has different, you're using your computers for all kinds of different things. I would suggest installing all of your updates as soon as you possibly can. And of course, weighing what it is you need to use that device for. So as not to create a larger safety issue for yourself by not having access to it. Any questions about that? Okay, what this doesn't address is unknown security issues. There are plenty of unknown security issues, as we've learned. And then it also doesn't address security issues that software companies have not yet made updates for. So every now and then there's a huge security issue and a software company can't update it faster than they need to let us know that there's an issue. Usually they just don't let us know and they send out a security update. That's in part so that people won't exploit the security issue. And that's in part, so it gives them a little time to patch it. And that's sometimes I think just a calculation they make for other reasons. But sometimes the security issue is big enough that we hear about it before they send out the patch. I actually think that happened with Zoom once in the past. Like security researchers found that there used to be a version of Zoom that would take over a feature of our browser, and it would open up a Zoom meeting directly from a link. You know, now we have to go to a page on Zoom's website and press launch. The thing that allowed them to bypass that created a hole in our browsers. And wasn't exploited that we know of, but was actually quite a big opening into our devices and was a problem. The security researcher in that case let Zoom know that that's what was happening, and Zoom did not address it in the amount of time that security researcher thought was appropriate for that big of an issue, and so released that information before Zoom released the patch. Sometimes we see that happening. And you might see it in the news. Generally, that does lead to a patch being released quite quickly. Any questions? Okay, so again, updates are free. To a point, I guess there are times where our operating system updates stop being free. If your computer has gotten to a place where you can no longer install updates, maybe the hardware is like the hardware and the software are out of sync. So if you have a computer that's 10 years old, it might be in a place where you are not able to install the software update because the software update requires more computing power than your device actually has at a hardware level in it. And so at that point, your computer is starting to be a risk for you. And as an organization, I would and a group of people working together, I would suggest trying to get in a practice of like budgeting so that you can retire computers that are too old to update. As an individual, I would also suggest doing that. But I do find that, especially organizations, sometimes there's a big mix of computers and ages. It is a good thing to take a look at if you are in charge of that. Great. So there are a few ways here to just check for updates and to turn on your automatic updates. Thanks again for posting those links, Adrian. On a Mac, this is in your system preferences. There's a little screenshot of what it looks like. You can choose to update now. Generally those, let's not update our operating system right now because generally that'll require that you sort of not be doing anything else on your device. But generally we can install updates on other software. So follow these instructions and just check and see if there are any updates available for you, and say yes to any updates that are not your operating system and not Zoom, so we can keep using these tools. Any questions? Did anybody find any updates they can install? I think I have one that I did not say yes to. Let's see. Yeah, I saw it yesterday when I took that screenshot. So I have an operating system update that I can run, and I'll do it after this lab tonight. For older Macs, is there not a software update section in system preferences? Great question. What do you know what version of OS X you're running? So, Tulani, this what I found here, I mean, you could see it, but it looks like this first piece of information or piece of advice is suggesting to update the actually update the operating system. Can your computer support an upgrade to operating system? Yeah. Other questions? Okay. All right. Great. So that's you can set it and forget it. You can set the automatic updates, or if you want a little more control, you can just start saying, just start a new practice of saying yes anytime you can, and making a note to yourself that you need to say yes if you need to take a minute before you do install an update. Okay, I'm going to change my screen share. So we've been talking about this a little bit in our oh, it's supposed to be moving, but anyway, in our prep calls, we've been talking about this question of what should we keep separate but in our digital lives, especially now that, I mean, many of us worked from home, maybe as, or at least organized from our same computers as we were using for other personal things. So what's the importance of keeping things separate? And how do we think through that? So I want to frame it this way, by asking these questions. Who are you when you're online? And why do you want or need to keep those separate? So I would say that we could start with something simple, like thinking that maybe there's a version of our online self that's more of our social self, and maybe there's a version that's our work self or our activist self. But soon enough, when we start to think about that, it becomes clearly more complicated, where my social personal self is actually like a very sort of broadly public self, but maybe of a separate kind of dating self, or maybe like multiple separate dating selves. And then maybe I'm a super fan, or like there's some niche part of the internet that I like to be involved in. And it neither does it, do I want it or do I need it to cross over with anything else? So maybe I'm a Buffy super fan. And that's sort of like separate, but it does overlap with my dating self. And then even my work online self is like, it becomes these separate things if I think about it. It's my digital safety trainer self. It's maybe a technology maker self and a researcher self. They exist differently. I sort of craft those different parts of my engagement online differently, and I intentionally link them in different ways. And I would actually try to keep that intentionally separate from other parts of my life. And that's because that's just how I socialize, or that's because they actually, like, there's something about those social identities that clash, maybe. And so I wanted to take a moment and ask people to think about this for yourselves, and just take a few minutes and take a piece of paper, just anything that's in front of you, or draw with your computer if that's what you prefer. And think about these questions also for yourself. Who am I online? And maybe take 2 rounds of that. Do a simple round with maybe a social person and a work person, and then make it more complicated. Are people getting a chance to try this out? What are you finding? Feel free to unmic yourself. Is this hard or easy to do? Are you already separating these different selves?
This is Sarah. For some of like the more like fun parts of myself, like gaming parts of myself, like that's a whole separate just email tag, all that is all separate. But it's funny, I didn't realize that like sometimes I'm disabled, and so and I have a big community on Twitter that's disabled, but the disabled and the gaming communities interact, and then so there I am in the middle, and so I didn't realize, I thought they were separate, but they're so much more interconnected.
Yeah.
For me, this is Wendy. I feel like it makes me want to think more about how much I want them to overlap and the implications of them overlapping. Sort of feels like it opens a can of worms.
Yes. Those worms are called risks, for sure. Anyone else want to share what that was like? Anything you discovered? Okay, so Wendy, you were leading us and Sarah actually into what the next questions to ask. So what we need to do now is do some risk assessment. And here are some guiding questions about how we assess, like what's important to us, what do we want to keep separate and why, and how do we prioritize this above anything else we might do in our day or digital lives. So so the first question I like to ask is, how important is it to me to keep any of these selves separate? That helps me assess, am I going to put time and energy into thinking about it? Simply. And then my next question is, if it is important, then who is it that might try to identify me across different selves? And how likely are they to succeed? How many resources do they have? And that might be like time or money to pay someone else to do it, or wherewithal to do it, or like just skill at doing this somehow, or access to databases. And then what are the possible impacts to me if someone combines these bits of me? And the impacts might be, oh, actually, if this thing and that thing get combined, not a big deal. I didn't mean for that to happen, but I can just keep going. Or this thing and that thing got combined by someone, and it's a real problem for me. I have to take some time and address in both places, like why these are both me. It's going to take me away from other important things in my life, and maybe even disrupts my participation in those spaces. That's a really high impact to me, and so that's something that I would really try to take care of and keep separate. And here's some ways that we can keep things separate. Depending on the resources of the people who might try to combine your identities, you might need to put more of these into place or fewer of these things. So some things, and I heard Sarah share, you're already doing some of these, using different email connected to different accounts. That'll go a pretty long way, actually, for a casual person who's trying to connect your identities. And by casual, I might mean anybody who has an interest in you and starts to look for you across the internet. Varying your screen names and handles across different platforms. There was certainly a time where my handle on every platform that I could sign up for was the same. And then I decided that I wanted some more privacy and started to vary them. So you could ask yourself if that's important to you or not. Or you might intentionally create a string of screen names that are the same across a certain set of places, and then a string of screen names that are the same in other places, or even on the same, maybe I have 2 Twitter handles. One is for this kind of version of myself, one is for that version of myself. Changing the phone numbers that you associate with accounts can be really important. You can set up a different Google Voice number attached to any Gmail account. So if I want to set up one identity for my Buffy fandom, maybe that's like Buffy Forever at Gmail, I might set up a Google Voice number associated with that email as well, and use that email and phone number to sign up for everything. Keeps it separate from the email that I use for my family and the phone number that I use for my family, for example. Think about how you represent yourself and the kinds of media that get associated with your identities online. Photos give away a lot of information. If you have identifiable tattoos or markings or clothing, there's identifiable locations that you're photographed in frequently. You might be thoughtful and careful about keeping those things separate, making sure that certain things aren't in images. Your social connections give a lot away. So if I have one handle, one place, but it has all the same social connections as the other handle that I have, it's pretty easy to guess who I am. And that's for a person with a moderate amount of resources, someone who's trying to guess, who cares to guess. That could be just another person in those spaces, or definitely we see that that's a sort of valuable thing to police and federal agencies when they're doing research. They're looking for connections. Descriptive and biographic text, and even terms of phrases, if we use the same kinds of, if you copy paste one sentence about, I grew up in a, let's choose something else. If I choose one descriptive sentence about me right now, that's, I love riding my yellow motorcycle everywhere I go. And I use that same sentence in a biographic text across different identities. It'll also be pretty easy to match me up across. Does that make sense? And it might be as simple as listing your favorite food. That's the same in every place. It's just like, think thoughtfully about separating those kinds of things too. It's easy for a human who has some time and intention to combine those. The other thing we can do is use our built-in privacy settings. Every different platform is going to give us different options, and you can really set these. They're better and better. It's obviously not foolproof, but it's getting easier to set those rings of privacy tighter, so you can and assess whether you want to be on a platform that doesn't let you control that kind of thing. You should be able to set so that only people that you've chosen to have access to your information have access to it. Only like friends that you've verified or something, for example, connections that you've verified can read your posts, can see information about it. So if you have the more resources your people have who are trying to combine your identities, the more protective measures you have to take. This slide is an example of things that I might do if I'm concerned about people who have a lot of resources. If I'm concerned about keeping identities separate from police, from even government agencies, I would take more of these steps. And again, they're not going to be foolproof. Somebody who has the resources of police or even corporations that have access to databases that are combining data from lots of sources might be able to see data that combines my identities in ways that I can't actually even take enough measures to prevent. For things that have already been created. So some things that I would do would be to mask my IP address. So every device on the internet has what's called an IP address. If you go to the site, what is my browser, you can see, if you scroll down, you'll see your IP address. If you click on that IP address, you get information about what it is. And then your IP address can reveal your physical location. So this IP address is clearly identifiable as located in Chicago, in Illinois. and it's then it's going to be linked to, in my case, it's linked to my internet service provider. So you could also tell which internet company I'm using to get access to the internet. These IP addresses are often located, or often can link you to where you are physically. And then also IP addresses get issued to organizations and institutions if they're big enough. So if I'm on a campus of a school, often a campus would have a set of IP addresses that are identifiable as those school IP addresses. An office campus would be the same. So if I access the internet from one location over and over, but I'm trying to show up as these different identities, and someone who's looking to combine my identities could see the IP addresses that I'm logging in from, they might be able to combine that over time. If I run Twitter, I would definitely be able to see this user account logged in from the same exact IP address as that user account. If I'm somebody who has the power to request those records from Twitter, I could do the same. Sometimes even on like chat boards, there's like a little trail of what IP address we use. Certainly on Wikipedia contributors, there's often a little tag about an IP address, or at least a location somebody entered information from. You can change your IP address by using a VPN, or a virtual private network. A free example is Siphon, it's listed here. TunnelBear also has a free version. ExpressVPN has only a paid version, and they let you, it's a piece of software, you turn it on and you can choose a location to dial into another network basically. You can set it with different countries of places you want to dial into. People often use VPNs if they're in one country and they want to access, say, Netflix in another country. You could use a VPN to show up like you're in Canada and then access Netflix from Canadian Netflix, as an example. You might also use this if you're trying to mask your identity and the place where you're dialing in from. Questions about VPNs? Non-illustrated way of describing it. And then I would suggest using different browsers for different identities if you really want to try to keep them separate. So again, in this "What is my browser" tool, you'll see any website can check what kind of browser is this person using, what version of what operating system are they using, and websites check that often to figure out what kind of data to send you. Do I need to send the mobile version of this data, this website? Do I need to send this person to the Mac download page instead of the Windows download page? So it's used for a lot of reasons. But with all the information that can be gathered just from your browser, we create a sort of a fingerprint. It's called a browser fingerprint. And again, if you ran a bunch of websites and you saw over time that somebody with the same browser fingerprint was showing up, you could combine the identities of that person. So you see how this requires more resources to combine this kind of information also. And we don't always have to be concerned about this. Going forward, if I wanted to create an identity on the internet that was disconnected from previous identities, I would create a brand new handle. Well, sorry, I would turn on a VPN. I would create a new email address and phone number, and I would sign up for accounts using that on that VPN, using that new account. I would only use a browser that I would use a browser like Tor, which is a browser that adds even more privacy and masks even more what computer and location I'm coming from. And I would only ever use that setup to access that identity. I would close that browser. I would turn off my my VPN, and then reconnect to a different place using the VPN before logging into anything else. So that's how to compartmentalize very, very, very carefully. Does that make sense? It takes a lot of work to keep something that separate, and for the most part, many of these identities that we need to keep separate, we can often manage just by having different handles, being thoughtful about how we identify ourselves in those spaces. Okay, questions? So what we covered today was things that are freely available to us that help us increase our privacy and safety. The first thing is backups. Always back stuff up. Devices are easily taken and broken and lost. So whether or not you're starting to encrypt your devices or not, it's really important to back up. Also, right, devices more increasingly get infected with ransomware. If you have a backup version of your data, you don't have to pay someone to decrypt your device if it's taken over by ransomware. You can just use your backup. Then we full disk encrypted our computers or looked at how to do that and how to do that for external memory. We installed antivirus software and set it to run daily. We looked for updates and how to set those to automatically update. And then we talked about compartmentalization of online identity. We have a little bit more time, and so just wanted to open it up for questions. Anything come up for folks, either about what we did today or something else that you're wondering about in digital security? Okay. So in that case, we can close out. And my ask is, before you leave us, please unmic yourself or share in the chat if you prefer, just one thing you're taking away from today. I'm taking away that I need to update my OS. Vast. Awareness of updates and virus protection. Yeah, thinking about identity separation. Making sure devices are encrypted and using VPN.
This is Sarah. Definitely thinking about how to separate the identities, what I'm most comfortable with. And it seems like I might have to make that a regular routine, just like kind of do a self check-in. So yeah.
This is Adrienne speaking. I am taking away the fact that I put way too much trust in Mac. And I was also in that group of thinking I didn't need some of these protections because I use Mac. So I've got a lot of work to do.
All right, anyone else? Well, thanks again for your time today, everybody. We are coming back on Thursday, and we'll look at, again, our specific devices that we are using. We'll learn how to like locate cameras and biometric sensors and things, and how to cover those up and turn them off and delete data that they're storing. We'll also talk about some other kinds of data that gets stored and attached by our devices, metadata, And we'll take a look at where that's stored and try to get a better handle on that going forward. And then we're also going to do an activity where we look for sensors just in our surroundings. There are more cameras and mics on devices around us than before. So we'll do the same, we'll follow the same practices and look at what kinds of cameras and biometrics are around us and how do we manage those. Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, if you put anything into place and then have specific questions, we'll also be doing brown bag super open hours, the 25th and 27th. We can stop recording.